People get pet reptiles for a variety of different reasons, but if you're anything like me, a big part of why you love pet reptiles is the ability to physically interact with them. This incredible opportunity we get as reptile keepers to develop a unique personal relationship with these wild animals. So today I'm going to be tier ranking common pet lizards based on how much fun they are to interact with. I made a very similar video recently about the most fun pet snakes to handle. And the reason I'm not using the language of handling for pet lizards is because there are plenty of incredible pet lizards that are a ton of fun to hold. But there are also so many engaging and wonderful pet lizards that you can't physically hold in your hand. So instead of breaking down pet lizards based on handleability, I'm going to be judging them based on how much fun they are to generally interact with. Let's get into it. My name is Cole, this is Magnus, welcome back to Boas and Buffoonery. Kicking things off with the D tier, these are lizards that are just not fantastic to interact with. These can still make fantastic pet lizards, but you probably won't get the bulk of your enjoyment from keeping them from physically interacting with them. Starting off with beaded lizards and Gila monsters. These are two of the coolest lizards on the planet, being some of the few non-snake lizards that pack venom, medically significant venom. And they're so rad, they're so cool, but the combination of their medically significant venom and the fact that they're sort of big and lumbering and slow moving and incredibly reclusive means you're probably not going to get a lot out of actually handling these lizards. I think they could be super cool and super unique to keep as pets, but holding one is almost not an option. And if you do, you're just sort of holding it away from you so that it doesn't bite you. And when you have them just out of their enclosure and just generally interacting with them, they don't really do much. They're also not quite as food crazy as some of the other medium to large pet lizards that you could potentially keep, which makes training them not all that interesting compared to those similar lizards. I love them, but they kick off the D tier. On a very different axis, I'm also going to put micro geckos like the Lepidactylus in the D tier because they make me incredibly nervous to interact with. They make me really scared that I am going to accidentally harm one of my pet lizards if I were to engage with them, whether that means holding them or just sort of playing with them the way you can with some larger species. These lizards are beautiful. They are phenomenal, but they are super fast moving, they are super tiny, and they are remarkably frail, which means there is a high likelihood that an accident handling them could lead to significant injury or even death of that animal, and that is just something that would not work for me personally. It would make me too scared to actually engage with that animal. However, if you are looking for a display animal as a pet, especially if you are someone who lives in a small apartment, I could not think of a better pet lizard for you. These are wonderful animals, and I have seen some incredibly well set up enclosures that really show off the beauty of these lizards, and I think that's how you have the most fun with a microgecko. Finally, rounding out the D tier, we have horned lizards. Now, this one might not make a lot of sense right off the bat. These are sort of smaller lizard, but they're not super tiny, and they are incredible looking. They look like tiny little spiky dragons with those silly goofy little tails. They're amazing. But what makes them not fantastic to handle? And that is they don't tolerate it well at all. They seem to get incredibly stressed out by interaction with humans. And if you try to actually hold your pet horned lizard, there is a chance that they could get so stressed out that they just pass away. I've heard stories of it happening. It's heartbreaking, and that would absolutely crush me. So I don't really want to hold this lizard. You don't want to hold your horned lizards any more than you absolutely have to. And in terms of engaging with them in other ways, like training them or feeding them, well, their entire diet is going to consist of ants, and you can't really hand feed them enough ants to sustain their diet. So you don't really get the same benefit that you might get from hand feeding or tongue feeding some of the other lizards that we're going to talk about on this list. Now let's get into the C tier where we can talk about lizards that you might actually want to hold. I'm going to start the C tier with a clear example of creator bias that you're just going to have to deal with for this video. Tokageckos. Look, I know they're incredibly flighty, I know they're obnoxiously loud, and I know they love to bite everything that moves in front of their face. But I have seen enough positive examples of handleable tokageckos or tongue-fed, hand-fed tokageckos that I have a delusional amount of hope that when I finally get my little neon blue tooth tornado, that mine is going to be lovely, that mine is going to be incredibly handleable. I know their reputation, and I know that they, unlike many other species, have earned their lousy reputations, but I love them, so I could not put them lower than C tier. And speaking of lizards that you will have to just accept some minor injuries from, accept some minor bleeding from, can I interest you in large monitor lizards? I love monitor lizards. These are some of the absolute kings of the pet reptile world. We are talking about the closest living relatives to the Komodo dragon, which, spoiler alert, is absolutely not on this list. I do not consider that to be a pet reptile. But monitor lizards are super intelligent, super curious, remarkably trainable, and an absolute nightmare if they go wrong. These are lizards that can do a great deal of damage to you. These are lizards that could take digits off of your body. These are lizards that could leave you with permanent scars. But they are also some of the most interesting lizards you could possibly interact with. You can have one free roaming your house if you live in the proper climate, and if you don't, bringing them out of their enclosure to personally engage with them is probably some of the most fun you can have as a reptile keeper. For years, I have told people in my life that a dream pet lizard of mine is a black-throated monitor, one of my favorite lizards in the entire world. And maybe someday in the future, when I have my own reptile zoo, that might become a possibility. I digress. The reality with most large monitors is that even if you have a remarkably friendly individual, you are still likely to be left with cuts and scrapes and scars, because even a friendly monitor lizard climbing up your leg is going to scratch you up. It is going to be unpleasant and painful, even if you love it. And finally, rounding out the C tier, we have the crocodile skinks. Crocodile skinks are absolutely adorable, and I know I say that about a lot of different animals on this channel, but I truly believe that red-eyed crocodile skinks in particular have an argument to be potentially the cutest animal on the planet. I mean, up there with sea lions and the Chinese alligator. These things are precious, but sort of similar to horned lizards, though not quite to the same extreme, these lizards are incredibly reclusive and seem to not tolerate handling very well. They don't like to be held, they don't seek it out, and it seems to stress them out more than it does many other lizard species, which is the main reason why I don't love handling them. Their small size also makes me a little bit nervous that I might drop one, or that a kid that I might hand it to would drop it or squeeze it to the point where this lizard could get hurt. And I don't think there's ever really a time where you're sitting with a crocodile skink on your lap just petting it, because it will run away, it will hide, and it can just create a lot of dangerous situations for the lizard itself, and that's why they find themselves down on C tier, despite, in my opinion, being maybe the cutest animals in the entire world. As it turns out, the C tier is actually just a big collection of a bunch of the lizards that I most want to keep in the future, which probably says something about my criteria for pet lizards being very different than my criteria for pet snakes. When it comes to pet snakes, I really value how handleable they are when I'm deciding whether or not I am interested in a snake as a pet. Whereas I think there are so many other ways to engage with your pet lizard that don't involve a lot of one-on-one interaction, that the ability to handle them or play with them or whatever that might look like to you is just a little less important for me personally with lizards than it is with snakes. But before we get into the B tier, I just really quick want to thank everyone who supports this content. Thank you so much if you have subscribed to this channel. Thank you so much if you watch these videos and like these videos. I do really care about this content and I do want to improve it. I am working with a good friend of mine who is a voice actor to set up an audio and video sort of system that will make these videos significantly more watchable, that will just increase the actual production quality of these videos. Right now, every video that you're watching on this channel was just filmed and recorded on my cell phone, and as much as I am proud of these videos that I'm putting out, I know that they could be so much better, and your support on the videos right now makes my investment in the future of this channel so much more reasonable. So thank you so very much for supporting this content. Now let's get into the B tier. Kicking off the B tier, we have one of the most popular pet reptiles in the entire world, and especially here in North America, leopard geckos. I'm also going to be including like African fat-tailed geckos and other similar species in this category. These are docile, generally slow-moving, and incredibly tolerant of handling. They are small, but not so small that you're likely to accidentally injure them, and they seem to a certain extent, seek out interaction with people, though they don't rely on it the way some other pets do. They are wonderful, and there is great reason for their popularity. So why would they be down in B tier? This sounds perfect. Well, the downside with leopard geckos really is twofold. One is handling them and interacting with them can be a little bit dull. There's not really a great level of training that you can do with a leopard gecko on account of them being kind of dumb. And when you're holding them, you're really just trying to make sure they don't fall out of your hands, as they're not spectacular climbers. So they are super cute and very friendly, but they're not super exciting to handle, kind of like corn snakes or ball pythons. They just sort of sit there, and they're great for that purpose, but they don't do a lot more. The other potential downside of fat-tailed geckos and leopard geckos is that they can potentially drop their tail, which is just sort of an uncomfortable experience both for the lizard and for the keeper, so they're not nearly as likely to drop their tail as some other species that we haven't yet talked about. And on what feels like the exact opposite end of B tier, we have a lizard that was incredibly popular during like the 80s and the 90s in the reptile hobby, and is either going to be an absolute S+ tier pet or is going to be a bottom of the barrel F tier pet. I am talking about iguanas, specifically green iguanas. Green iguanas have certainly earned their reputation as little goblins that will lacerate your shins with that whip they call a tail. These are very large lizards that can do serious damage to you, even if you don't get one that bites, even if you just have one that may defensively tail whip. They can cause real damage. However, if you have a well-socialized green iguana, if you get a green iguana as a baby and you raise it around people, and realistically you get kind of lucky about how they go through their teenage years, especially males, you have to get really lucky with how that iguana puberty hits them, you will have one of the coolest possible pet reptiles you could ever ask for. You get this tree-climbing velociraptor that you can hand feed vegetables because they're vegetarian, they're herbivorous lizards. They're just so incredibly awesome. If you get a really, really good green iguana, you have one of the best pet lizards in the entire world. However, more commonly, you have a bad green iguana and you have one of the worst pet lizards you could possibly ask for. So I slotted them right in the middle, right in the B tier, because that's the middle of the two extremes. Next up in the B tier, we have a group of lizards that are easily in contention for the most beautiful lizards in the entire world: chameleons. Chameleons in general are sort of reclusive lizards, but once you build up a trust with a chameleon, you have one of the coolest lizards to interact with. I love animals that will eat out of your hand, and chameleons will absolutely do that. And I also have a huge bias towards animals that will just sort of climb all over you, and a trusting chameleon will absolutely do that for you. They sound almost perfect, and they really are fantastic. fantastic. But this is going to be a case of my personal experience really knocking these animals down a peg or two, because almost every chameleon that I've ever interacted with has been, as I've described them, an angry little sunfish. Most of the chameleons, for whatever reason, that I've personally interacted with have tried to bite me, have hissed at me, have flung themselves out of a tree to get away from me. I've actually been bitten by a couple chameleons, and that bite is unpleasant. For whatever reason, I don't seem to do very well with chameleons. That's not every chameleon. Obviously, I have had the pleasure of interacting with a couple chameleons that did, like I said, climb up on my arm, ate out of my hands, and that experience was so much fun that it sort of makes up for the majority of chameleons that I've had to work with being kind of nasty. But the other thing sort of keeping chameleons out of the A and the S tier is that they can be rather frail. Many species of chameleons are sort of small and a little bit clumsy, and if they fall, they can really hurt themselves. And if they sort of move their leg the wrong way or you move the wrong way, you can potentially injure them pretty severely. They are strong and they are fun to interact with. I just think there is a bit of a higher risk of injuring a chameleon compared to some of the other animals on this list. Rounding out the B tier, we have my personal favorite genus of agamid lizards, the Uromastyx. Like my friend Magnus here, the Uromastyx jayri, all the way up to the giant Uromastyx aegyptica, these lizards are phenomenal. They are a ton of fun to engage with because they are full of spunk and personality, and they can't hurt you, but they will probably try. In my experience, most Uromastyx that I get to interact with are a little bit on the sassy side. They will throw little hissy fits, and they do generally prefer to be left alone. Magnus, even, when I go to take him out of his enclosure, at first will sort of angry belly dance at me. Occasionally, he will even whip me with his tail, and because he can't hurt me, it mostly just adds to the charm for me personally. I think it makes them just a little bit cuter that they are a little bit on the spicy side. But I do acknowledge that for the average person, they probably don't want to get tail whipped by their tiny little pet Ankylosaurus. I think it adds a little bit to their charm, but I don't think that most people appreciate that part of interacting with Uromastyx. I do think you will enjoy their adorable little face and their super cute personalities, and they are so individualistic. Like, they are so different from individual to individual that I think it's hard to place like a blanket ranking on all Uromastyx, but I think if I had to, I'd put them in B tier, so that's where they sit. So what makes for an A tier interactive pet lizard? Well, I don't think there's a real pattern here. The three animals that I want to talk about are vastly different from one another, but I have a strong conviction that all of them belong in the A tier for their unique reasons. Kicking off the A tier, this one will make the most sense if you watched that snake handleability tier ranking video, because I think it tracks personality-wise for myself. I really like large, curious, trainable reptiles, and that's why I absolutely love small to medium-sized monitor lizards. Animals like Aki monitors, Pilbara rock monitors, tree monitors, and savanna monitors. They have almost all the upside of working with the large monitor lizards. They're still super curious, they're still super active, they're still remarkably intelligent, so you can train them. There's just not really any of the risk or potential danger associated with working with some of the large monitor lizards. In particular, savanna monitors have always been one of my favorite lizards to work with. Those big, chunky, dinosaur-looking heads are so incredibly cute, and they are super receptive to things like tongue feeding and different types of training that make them an absolute blast to work with. But if you're listening to me talk about how much I love engaging with something like a savanna monitor, you may not expect that the next A-tier interactive lizard on this list is the New Caledonian geckos. Things like gargoyle geckos and crested geckos are some of the best possible lizards to truly handle. I love New Caledonian geckos. In particular, I am a huge fan of gargoyle geckos, as they tend to be a little bit more chill than crested geckos, but they're awesome. They'll climb all over your hands, they'll jump, they'll make you laugh. They are so much fun. And you can hand feed them. That is something you can do with them, though it's not something that I think really adds a great deal because handling them exclusively is so much fun. The only thing keeping the New Caledonian geckos out of the literal S tier is the fact that occasionally they do drop their tails. And with something like a crested gecko, they won't grow back. So there is a little bit of stress, especially when they're young, that they'll just fly out of your hands and they'll lose their tail in the process. And other than that one downside, they are like the perfect handling lizards. They're so much fun. They have so much personality. They're incredibly reluctant to bite. They're generally very social lizards that to some extent will seek out handling with humans. I just love the New Caledonian geckos. And again, I'm a little bit biased towards the gargoyle geckos over crested geckos, but they're both A-tier lizards. And rounding out the A tier is the blue tongue skink. Now, this one might not make a lot of sense. I talk a lot about how much I value curiosity and activity level in my lizards. So why do I have the ultimate couch potato skink on this list? They just seem to have a curiosity and awareness about them that makes up for the fact that they don't move around as much as some of these other lizards. I just find interacting with a blue tongue skink to be so incredibly peaceful. I've never met one that wasn't lovely. I've never met one that shied away from human interaction. And I've never met one that didn't make me laugh. They all have these incredibly unique and bizarre personalities that I am just so incredibly drawn to. This one is absolutely just a personal bias thing because I think if I go by most of my own criteria, blue tongue skinks shouldn't be as high as they are. But I absolutely friggin' love them. They are my absolute favorite sit and watch a movie with them lizard. I think they're so cool. I think they have a lot of the upside of something like a ball python or actually other sort of slow moving snake species. They just seem to do a little bit more than those snakes. Now, when I thought about making this video and I thought about the S tier, I thought to myself, well, I usually have some sort of mildly controversial opinions. I usually have some sort of mildly hot take when it comes to the type of animals that I like the best. But when I put together this list, when I put together the S tier best lizards to possibly interact with, I realized I'm kind of going with the grain on this one. I don't think I have a lot of controversial opinions. Kicking off S tier, I have probably, to this date, the most popular pet lizard in the entire world, bearded dragons. And I think bearded dragons owe a great deal of their popularity due to how wonderful they are to interact with. Not only are they easy to handle and generally do really well with human interaction, but they also make it worth your while. They are funny. They are full of personality. They will hold on to you. They will sprint across the room for food and they'll probably like slide and fall over themselves. They're just a delight to be around. And unlike other pet reptiles that are easy to handle, bearded dragons will do things on a day-to-day basis that catch you off guard. Sometimes you'll have your incredibly friendly bearded dragon all of a sudden puff up at you with that big black beard and tell you to get lost. Sometimes you'll have your bearded dragon sprint across the room to grab the egglet of your like shoelace because they thought it was food, and then when they bite onto it they like whip their head back and they spit it out. It's super funny. I just find bearded dragons to be wonderful, and I think they are one of those reptiles that deserves all the popularity that they have. Now, I do think there is something to be said that because of their popularity, they don't get very well taken care of a lot of the time, but that's not a bearded dragon's fault. That is a people problem. And the next S tier lizard that I have is another lizard that every doofus with a camera and a passion for reptiles has ever talked about. That is tree skinks, especially emerald tree skinks. For the longest time, I had only seen videos about these animals and watched them jumping out of enclosures onto people, and they climb all over you, and they seem to actively seek out human interaction. And honestly, until I had interacted with them, I thought they were awesome. I thought they were really cool, but I thought that the hype was maybe a little overblown. And then I got the chance to actually interact with one. I got the chance to meet one. And they live up to every ounce of the hype you could possibly imagine. It took a lot of willpower for me not to go home and immediately figure out how I could get my very own emerald tree skinks. They're amazing. They're a ton of fun. They're super curious. They will climb all over you, and they're fast enough to like keep you on your toes. But unlike something like a crested gecko, they're unlikely to just randomly launch themselves off of you to their doom the way those New Caledonian geckos might. They really do just fit the bill of maybe one of the best pet reptiles in the entire world, and for handleability, they are really tough to beat. But for me, my absolute number one favorite lizard to interact with, the lizard that I have the most fun training with, the lizard that I have the most fun holding, the lizard that I have the most fun just being in the presence of, is tegus, especially black and white tegus, but I've worked with Argentine red tegus. I've seen golden tegus in the wild. Tegus are remarkable. They take everything that you love about monitor lizards and add a little bit of goofball energy there. They're not quite as high strung as our monitor lizards, so they're usually not quite as fast, as whippy, as likely to smack you with their tail. In general, I find them to be more docile than our monitor lizards, and they have a bit more of an interesting, diverse diet, being omnivores, than monitor lizards. I love tegus, especially like male tegus that have the big muscly jowls that just look like they've got big chubby cheeks. They are super, super cute. They are a ton of fun to be around. They are a ton of fun to train, and they are remarkably intelligent. They will climb up your leg, and because they don't have quite the razor sharp claws that many monitor species have, they won't leave you with quite as deep of cuts, and they are just so much fun. They are individual enough to really keep you on your toes. And when you're meeting a new tegu, you really have to put in the work to build that trust. But once you have that trust, they are just the best possible pet lizard to just hang out with. But my friends, that is my tier list of the most fun lizards to interact with. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what I got wrong, what I got right, or what lizard that I didn't put on this list that you felt needed to be on here. I am excited to read all the comments. I'll respond to as many as I can. Have a wonderful rest of your day, an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Now, I knew that tegus were going to be in the S tier. What I didn't know when I was writing the script for this video was that in talking about tegus this week, I would have to add this part. Just yesterday, on the day that I'm recording this video, and about a week ago, the day that you'll be watching this video, Clint Laidlaw of Clint's Reptiles put out a video that was a tribute to his beloved pet tegu, Gus Gus. And I didn't feel it was right to make this video and hype up tegus and not mention this animal that is such a beloved figure in the reptile world. I watch a lot of reptile content, and over the years, I watch less and less of it. And if there's one channel that I always watch every upload, it's Clint's Reptiles. And a big thing that drew me to his videos when I started was his relationship with some of his animals, in particular, his relationship with Gus Gus. And I just want to wish my condolences to Clint and his family and everyone over at Clint's Reptiles and everyone who loved Gus Gus. And if you're watching this video, odds are that you have been impacted by this lizard, even if you don't know it, just because you love Clint's newer videos. I think he makes a really good point in his tribute video that if it wasn't for Gus Gus, he might not have the YouTube channel that he does. I encourage you to go watch that video. It is a beautiful, beautiful tribute to a beloved pet. And yeah, I just wishing Clint and his family all the best right now as they try to recover from the loss of a friend. But yeah, he was an amazing, amazing lizard. He's an absolute legend in our community, and his legend will never die.